Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me again in our 365 Days with Jesus, also known as Reading the Bible in a Year Challenge. I'm so glad to be back, and my name is Yvette Andino. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for taking the time to, engage with us and engage in God's Word each and every day. So for today's Bible reading assigned chapters, we're going to continue the first book of Kings, chapter 16, 17, and 18. Again, it's the first book of Kings, so 1 Kings, chapter 16, 17, and 18. I would say I would categorize these readings as like a medium size reading. It takes like about maybe 15 minutes, 20 max. Um and I read the amplified Bible commentary. I apologize, the Amplified Bible version. So it takes a little more because it's a bit more descriptive and it explains things a lot more in depth and more specific. So like, there's like certain measurements that back in biblical times they'll use it like they'll find like a modern conversion of it. So like we can understand like, inches, centimeters, like our current metric and customary measurement system, things like that, and much more other commentary as well for like spiritual guidance. So I truly like the Amplified Bible version, and I'm sure you guys are comfortable with the Bible version you guys read. So the most important thing is find what works for you, but also always pray before you read. So every time before I read my Bible, I always pray and ask for God's Spirit. um okay, so for chapter 16, it talks about the prophecy against Basha, and then you also see. Oh, okay, so it's just that's the subtopic. So the prophecy against Basha. So Basha is the son of Jeroboam, and we knew from yesterday's video, or from yesterday's chapters 13 to 15 of First Kings, we know that Jeroboam did evil in the eyes of the Lord. When we mean by evil is he practiced pagan worship and allowed his nation, or the nation of Israel, and Judah. Remember, they were divided into two, but the whole Israel, what we call Israel today, to sin and to commit pagan worship. And we know that's one of the like defiling one of the 10 commandments, and it's one of the first one, right? So that's something very, for God, is very atrocious. So Baasha is his son, and Baasha continued the same evil pattern. So the same thing God told to Jehu, who's the son of Hanai, so it's like another prophet of Israel and a man of God. He tells him this is what's going to happen, and basically says, I'm going to take away all of Baasha's like bloodline and household and destroy all the family. And it's true. Um Baasha, um I just want to make sure that he died, and he was all, it says here in verse 7, he was destroyed, but I'm trying to see. So it says, but it just says, it doesn't say how he died. It just has that curse that God has in the first verses. It says, the dogs will eat anyone belonging to Basha who dies in the city, and the birds of the sky will eat anyone belonging to him who dies in the field. I think I could safely say he died like a natural death, but I'm sure his family, like whoever died, would be, that prophecy will be fulfilled. Now, um, so Asa is the king of Judah. So remember, Israel's divided into Israel and Judah. Now Ella is the son of Baasha. He was the king of Israel. You could say Israel's like the more northern, and Judah is the southern part of Israel, what we call Israel in 2021. Um, but Baasha's son Ella also continued the evil, and then one day he actually gets drunk, and he gets drunk in the house of Arza. And Arza, I'm not sure who it is, but Arza's probably someone of importance to him. But he was there. He got drunk. Then Zimri, or his servant, they say his servant Zimri, but Zimri had military intelligence. It said in verse 9, commander of half of his chariots, conspired against Ella. So he had military intelligence. He knew how to precisely kill. So he does kill Ella, and he kills all of Baasha's descendants. So remember, Ella is the son of Baasha. Baasha is the son of Jeroboam. Jeroboam was this evil king that did all that pagan worship. So all of the descendants of Jeroboam, Baasha, and now Ella, and Ella himself were killed because back then the Amplified Bible commentary talks about the blood avengers, and this is laws from the book of Leviticus. If you guys recall, it says it refers to relatives who would have the obligation to kill Zimri. Remember, Zimri was Ella's military commander in chief who conspired against him to avenge Basha's death. So Zimri's smart. He's like, I know this blood avenger law, so I'm gonna kill all of them. So there's no one avenging my death. But Zimri, that was just pure evil what he did too, just assassinating. So, um, which is very interesting because it shows that Zimri reigned over Israel just 7 days at Tirzah. So I'm like, this was a very short reign. So what happened was, I'm just trying to recall Zimri. So God also goes against Zimri because of what he did. So they what was Zimri, he, I know he gets killed. I'm trying to remember what exactly happened. Yeah, no. Seems like he completes suicide. So that's why I when it comes to those kind of heavy topics like suicide, murder, especially with suicide as a school counselor, I want to make sure I'm saying this accurately. So in verse 17, it says Omri, Omri is another leader in Israel. I think he was for Judah. Oh no, Judah would have been Asa. So I'm sorry, I'm confusing the names. But anyways, Amri says in verse went up from Giberton, and all the Israel went with him. They besieged Tirzah, and Tirzah is where Zimri, the military conspirator who went against Ella, who killed Ella, he's reigning Israel, but in that city Tirzah. When Zimri saw that the city was taken, he went into the fortress of the king's palace, and while inside, he set fire to the king's palace and died. Because of the sins he had committed doing evil in the sight of the Lord by walking in the way of Jeroboam, and because of his sin, he caused Israel to sin. He made them continue the pagan worship. Now, as for the rest of the acts of Zimri, they're also in the Chronicles of the King of Israel. So I believe it's in the First and Second Chronicles in the Old Testament. Um, that was interesting. A very short reign. Um, so now Israel is divided, and when we mean by Israel, I mean the northern part of Israel. Remember, the other part is called Judah, the southern part. So Israel's divided because there's two military leaders or two potential king leaders, and one is called Timni, the son of Gennat, to make him king, and the other half followed Omri. However, those who followed Omri prevailed over those who followed Timni. And Timni died because he was like a rival to the throne. Then Omri became king. In the 31st year of Asa, remember Asa's still the king of Judah, Omri became king over Israel and reigned for 12 years. And it seems like Judah is a lot more stable than Israel, the northern part of Israel. Omri bought the hills of Samaria bought the hills to Samaria from Shemer. Shemer was another tribe nation that was not Israel. For 2 talents of silver, and he built a city on the hill. And we know that. We've heard of city on the hill. Fortified and named the city which he built Samaria. In Hebrew, it means Shomeron. It's the word is Shomeron. After the owner of the hill, Shemer. Omri, however, did evil. Verse 25, in the eye of the sight of the Lord, he acted more wickedly. He continued the pagan worship. Um, he walked in all the ways of Jeroboam, just like the same thing. He made Israel, commit sin, and that provoked God. And now all of the rest of the evil acts he did, it's also in the book of the Chronicles. And then he dies. So now after Omri, Ahab is his son, and Ahab is a very famous king, and I knew about Ahab since I was a little girl. My mom bought me this Nest Entertainment videos. If you guys haven't seen this for like your kids, I highly recommend going on YouTube. A lot of them are free, or purchase Nest, even though it's like VHS. I'm not sure if now they have the DVDs. But it's amazing. Nest Entertainment is a company that made these Bible and Christian movies they did their best to make it exactly, and they even show you like the verses. And you can always read it to your children and go back. But I love it. I'm allowing like I'm showcasing it to my nephews. They like it a lot. And it's like, because of these movies, I understood a lot more the Bible. So I definitely recommend Nestor Entertainment. So shout out to Nestor Entertainment. And Ahab is a famous king that I remember from the movies and from reading, the book of the First Kings, chapter 16 through 18, growing up in the church. Ahab just did worse than all of them. Like, he, whatever pagan worship the other ones did was like miniature compared to, he just went full blast because he marries Jezebel, and Jezebel's the daughter of the another tribal nation called Sidonians, but they're pagan. And Sidonians, it's, you could say it's the modern land of Lebanon, and she's from Tyre, and Tyre is this one of the cities of Lebanon in our 2021 current world. And Jezebel was really evil. Like, she killed all the prophets of God, and we're gonna read into that much later in our next chapter. So, Ahab did even worse, and then, but something nice with all that wickedness of Ahab and Jezebel, it says in Ahab's days, Hiel, the Bethelite, so this man from Bethel, he rebuilt Jericho. He laid its foundations, which is verse 34, with the loss of Abiram, his firstborn, and set up its gates with the loss of his youngest son, Segub. He lost two sons, and he's still able to make the city for God. Like, oh my goodness. Glory to God. In accordance with the word of the Lord, which God spoke through Joshua, the son of Nun. I remember Joshua's way back when we did the book of Joshua. And he, was the next leader after Moses. So, wow, God truly keeps his promises. So that was I like the silver lining in the clouds. That was something very positive I liked with this chapter. Now, First Kings chapter 17 talks about Elijah. Elijah is a very famous prophet in the Torah, in the Jew, I call it the Jewish Bible, but in the Christian Bible, and I also know in Islam, Elijah is very high praised in our God centered religions, and especially in Christianity. Speaking as a Christian, as some of the Adventists, um, he's famous for not tasting death. Like, he's able to go straight to heaven into these fiery chariots. It's very nice. We're gonna be reading that in a few days. So Elijah becomes he's one of God's prophets or God's messengers, right? God's servants. And he tells Ahab there's gonna be a famine. And the famine's not gonna finish until me, Elijah, tells God, hey, we need water, whenever he tells him to. That's the deal, or that is the covenant that, or the promise that God does for Elijah. So he tells Ahab, Ahab gets angry, and then he still continues his wicked ways and still, does the pagan worship. So even with that horrible punishment, he still didn't repent. And he's very, very influenced by his wife, Jezebel, like I had mentioned earlier. Um, And then God tells, Elijah, you're going to be in this brook called Cherith, which is east of the Jordan River. And he's like, the ravens, the birds are going to sustain you. And you're going to be, getting food from these birds, and you're going to be drinking from the water. Um, the brook had dried up because there was no rain, because that's what Elijah had told Ahab, there's going to be a famine. So famine, there's like a drought, there's no food, there's no water. So I apologize, famine is no food, drought is no water, but there, I guess there was both. When there's no water, you can't have food. So, and then God tells Elijah, you're going to this town called Zarephath, a town located along the Mediterranean Sea. So maybe it's like border Israel, Greece, Lebanon, those countries that have Mediterranean Sea. So he goes, and God tells him there's a widow that's gonna serve you. And God, tells Elijah, this is where you're tell this the widow, you're gonna make me this loaf of bread, and I'm gonna eat first, and then you and your son are gonna eat. You're probably like asking why. So this widow was very poor due to the drought and the famine. She's a widow, so she's probably, if her husband had many debts to pay, she's probably trying to pay. And now with a drought and a famine, it's even worse. So, and when Elijah comes to introduce himself, who he is, I'm a man of God. God told me to come here, and God told me that you will feed me. but you're gonna feed me first. But she's like, how can I feed you first if this little bit of oil I have and this little bit of flour, I'm gonna make this like little bread or some type of thing to eat with that little bit of oil and flour, and I'm gonna give it to my son and me, so it's our last meal. I don't have enough for you or for us, like to survive. And Elijah's like, do not worry, do as I said, and God promises you that if you do what I'm saying, to serve me first. And in a way, he's telling her to serve God first, right? Like Elijah's that representative in a way, in the human, right? But he's God's messenger. But I think this is God's way of telling her, depend on me, have faith in me. Everything else will be in abundance. Everything else will be added to you. And God promises her no oil or no flour will ever run out, or like I guess water and the other things she can do with flour. And so she did. That was a huge leap of faith, I say. She served Elijah, and exactly what happens is when she, like, I could only imagine this. And based on the next entertainment movies, the kids, your children, can visualize it. So let's say the bottle of oil is like this. It started to overflow. Everything was overflowing. So she was excited and happy, like, we have food, we have nutrition during this crazy condition. So it's one of my favorite stories. So that's why I'm very, very excited to talk about it. So many days later, Elijah's still there. They're surviving, they're eating well. But all of a sudden, the widow that we don't even know her name, so I call her the widow, and the Bible calls her the widow. Her son gets very sick. He gets so sick that he's not able to breathe anymore. He's like his breath of life was gone, so he passed away. And then the widow's like, asks him in verse 18, what problem is there between you and me, O man of God? Have you come to bring my sin to mind and put my son to death? So we don't know what sin she's referring to, nor we have to. It's none of our business. But I guess she's feeling guilty over her son's death. Like, oh my gosh, what I did in the past is that why my son's dying? So Elijah said, give me your son. So then he takes him up like the bedroom, like an upstairs and upper room, and he prays to God. In verse 20, oh Lord my God, have you brought further tragedy to the widow with whom I am staying by causing her son to die? Then he stretched himself out upon the child 3 times and called the Lord and said, oh Lord my God, please let this child's life return to him. The Lord heard the voice of Elijah, and the life of the child returned to him, and he revived. He came back to life. Elijah took the child and brought him down from the upper room into the lower part of the house, like a loft, like second floor, first floor, you could think of, and gave him to his mother. Elijah said, see, your son is alive. Then the woman said to Elijah, now I know that you are a man of God, that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth. So this just made me think this, and I know I always ask questions at the end, but now I need to ask this burning question. If God was with her, right, with the first miracle, with the oil and the flour, after she took that leap of faith to provide Elijah first with food, with the bread, that's the little bit that she had, didn't she already understand that God is Lord? Or was this another try to reinforce that? Or did she forget after, surviving and thriving those days of eating good food, like having the flour and the oil, and making maybe pies or anything, I don't know what she can make with that. It's just a food for thought, right? It's just thinking, I'm like, now she knows. I think because of that last miracle, her son resurrecting in a way, um, she's like, that's it. I can never doubt God again. So I think that was a learning opportunity for her faith. So that's amazing. So now, and God wanted her saved and that she can have that relationship. So God knows our hearts, and He's like, this is my daughter. I need her to believe in me. He loves us so much. So He wants us to trust Him, right? When you love someone, when you trust that person, you want that trust to be reciprocated as well. That's what God wanted for this lady. That's what I just learned these last few minutes, I feel. All right, so now the last chapter for today is 1 Kings chapter 18, and it's Obadiah meeting Elijah, and then God or Baal on Mount Carmel, which is then we see Elijah's prayer at the end, and this chapter is a bit lengthy, but it's amazing. So the first part is Obadiah meeting Elijah. Who is Obadiah? Obadiah is Ahab's trustful servant. However, Obadiah fears the Lord. He has a great respect and reverence of the Lord. He's not terrified of him. He's not shaking with panic and anxiety of God. He adores God. However, he is the king's servant, so he has to do what his king is asking. His king is very evil. Not that Obadiah did evil things. So Ahab told many years ago to Obadiah, I need you to kill all the prophets of God. But Obadiah did not do it. He actually was able to rescue 100 prophets and hide them in caves, like 50 in one cave, 50 in another, and sustain them. He nourished them with bread and water. So kudos Obadiah. Then now the second time is when Obadiah's on out in in the land doing, oh, he was doing a surveying the land for Ahab tells him, listen, we need to make sure the cattle, the horses can survive. Let's take some of them so we don't have to kill all of them, because they're going to be they're getting dehydrated, like there's not enough water supply because of this drought. We need to save as much as we can. Go this way and I go the other way. So, but then on his way to going, let's say, north or left or right, he meets Elijah. And he's like, "Oh Lord, how are you? Like, is this you? Are you Elijah? Like, I remember you. And how are you doing?" And then Elijah's like, "Yes, this is me." And Elijah tells him, "Hey, tell your master Ahab that I'm gonna see him today." And Obadiah's like, I don't believe this nonsense," he says. He tells him, "No, if I tell him and you don't come, or if you don't stay here, or you don't meet Ahab where you're telling me to tell him where to meet you, and you're not there, you know what's going to happen to me? I'm going to die." And he even reminds Elijah, do you not remember what I did for God?" But that was to survive. So he tells him, "Don't you remember what I did for God? I put the 50 prophets in one cave, put the other 50 in another cave, and I sustained them with food and water. Do you remember that? So please, I respect the Lord, but please don't do this. Don't mess with me. Don't mess with me. Don't lie to me." And Elijah said, he used God's name. "In God's name, I will be right here. Just tell your master, come meet me here now." And Obadiah's like, "Okay, I got your word. I got God's word." He does it, and Ahab meets him there at whatever point he tells him to. So Ahab is like, "Are you the one who's like making Israel suffer and not letting us like survive well, or have a good nourished life, and making us suffer with no water, no food, and all that?" And Elijah's like, "This is what we're gonna do. We're you've done so much wicked things, and it's your fault and your father's fault, right? Because Ahab followed his father Omri, who did really evil things, as well as the pagan worship. But Ahab just did a lot more by marrying Jezebel. Jezebel was just really wicked lady, killing God's people. And he's like, "It's because of you guys that there's this drought." He's like, "This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go to Mount Carmel, and you're gonna bring all the prophets that you so trust with Baal, the pagan gods. You're going to bring all of Jezebel's prophets of Baal and Asherah. Asherah is another goddess. Bring so it's 850 prophets. So 450 for Baal and 400 for Asherah. I'm the only prophet for God, but I'll be there, meaning you guys on the top of Mount Carmel." And Ahab is like, "Okay, what's the deal?" And Elijah tells him, "This is what God wants. This is what we're gonna do. We're both gonna make water sacrifices or water altars, and the God who responds in fire or consuming that water altar, right? Like drinking like a bottle of water, that's or a fountain of water, that is going to be God. That's who the real God is." And Ahab's like, "Of course, this is easy." So he does it. They go to Mount Carmel, which is now we're in the second part of this chapter. He does these water altars for their pagan gods. And they did it, and their gods weren't answering them. So the Baal's prophets were like, "Okay, let's see what else we can do." They try to get their god's attention by doing some creepy things like cutting themselves and having their blood gush out. So I don't know if they died or they I don't know how deep the cut was, but they lost a lot of blood or they died. I'm not sure. So then Elijah starts mocking them after a whole day. Imagine a whole day passing, and your friend or whoever you need to respond to hasn't gotten back to you. It's like frustrating and annoying and angry provoking. Elijah mocks them. Is like, "Ha, your God is probably sleeping, or your God is probably busy doing an errand. That's why he's gonna come later. Don't worry." Like very sarcastic with them. So finally it's Elijah's turn, and they're like, "All right, what do you have?" So then Elijah does the water altars. He also, oh, they have bulls too. They sacrifice bulls with the altars. So he cuts up the bull that God tells him to do. He makes sure there's 12 stones surrounding the altar, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, which is what God instructed him to do as well. And Elijah's also aware like the sacrifice knowledge. And then he prays to God a beautiful prayer. Listen, I want these people to know the real God and the love you have for us and the love I have for you as my Lord. Please come down. And God came down, consumed that awesome water altar, and then all Israel's like, God is Lord, the God is Lord. Like they repented and they're like, this is who God is. They in a way had to see to believe it, right? Unfortunately. So Elijah, now that everyone believes in Elijah and God, most importantly, Elijah said, go get these Baal's prophets, and he told the soldiers of Ahab, kill them. And they did, because they believe in God and they had that respect for him. That's also one of the laws of the in Leviticus, or they call it the Moses laws, where anyone who, you can say, conspires or provokes the people to do pagan worship must be killed. And also that's like a defilement of the Ten Commandments. And remember, pagan worship was very evil acts. They would do child sacrifices, cut themselves, kill themselves. They would do sexual orgies, and like really, really, if you guys look up like Wiccan and pagan worship, it's just really cruel and inhumane and just derogative. So that is why God was very angry. So Elijah tells Ahab, now go. He's like, go out of the mountain. He's like, go and eat. He's like, you're gonna notice rain is gonna come down. So he tells Ahab, start going. So Ahab goes home in, what we call cars, but in a chariot and a horse. But then all of a sudden at the end it says God gives Elijah this supernatural strength. You could find that in verse 46. Then the hand of the Lord came upon Elijah, giving him supernatural strength. He girded up his loins and outran Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Jezreel is the winter home of Ahab. So if you're, imagine, it's like, let's pretend you're going car and someone else is going in bike. Let's say bike, but I'll run you to your house, and let's say it's like a mile, and I just by running get there quicker than in a car or in a bike or in a horse ride. That means God was there with you. So he gives this supernatural strength to Elijah. Why? We'll find out what happens tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoyed these chapters. I know it was a bit long, it was a bit lengthy, but it was filled with so much, how we say, meat, and so much live and spiritual awakening, and just I enjoyed it so much. So thank you, everyone. God bless you. And just know, when you choose God, everything just flows. Everything just, not saying that life it gets easy. It does not. However, our problems become like teamwork with God. Like our burdens feel like, I can do this because God is with me. Not that it's easy homework or an easy project or an easy trial, no. But it becomes manageable because God is with us, and we feel just this joy and peace, and we just feel great. So I feel amazing doing this. I'm very happy to be able to do it. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day or evening, afternoon. Thank you so much, and God bless.